Welcome to Down to Earth episode 3. It has been a little while since the last one. I'm hoping I can start doing these a little bit more consistently, but we'll see how this goes. Go ahead and leave your questions for the next video in the comments below, but let's go ahead and jump into this. Before actually jumping into the first question though, I wanted to bring up something that I thought was interesting. So I'm on the LEGO website on the Lord of the Rings page, and I was reading this text here and noticed that it had some interesting references that I hadn't seen LEGO reference before. So it actually references the Rings of Power TV show, which is a first. I don't think they have mentioned that or talked about that at all. They don't have the license for it as far as I know, but I see that they're talking about it here on their page, which is actually kind of interesting. It's actually kind of encouraging. I'm hoping that that means something, or at least they're hinting something. It probably doesn't. Like, I don't want to get your hopes up, but it's just cool to see them acknowledge it and reference it. And then not only that, but we also see them mention the Arkenstone here, which is, of course, from The Hobbit. So they're not only talking about Lord of the Rings stuff now, they're also talking about the Rings of Power show and Hobbit-related items. So I just thought that was interesting because, as far as I know, they only have the license for the Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring, Two Towers, and Return of the King, as it says here at the bottom of the page. And that's not the books, right? The book rights, but that's the rights from New Line Productions, which made the movies. So I don't think they have rights for characters like Tom Bombadil and things like that. I could be wrong on that, but that's what I would assume. I just thought that was interesting though, so I wanted to start this video off with that, even though it's not a question. I just wanted to share that. But okay, the first question is from JMOC Studios, asks, do you do YouTube full-time? And if not, do you plan on it? So I don't do this full-time. This is just something I do on the side when I'm able, and it definitely is a lot to keep up with. YouTube is no joke, especially if you want to actually grow a channel and be consistent, which is kind of what you need to do to grow a channel. So it's difficult to balance this with everything else. I don't do this full-time at all, and I don't have any plans to, though, of course, if something were to happen with the channel and it took off and was able to like provide for me and my wife full-time, then that's great. But the channel would need to grow a lot in order for that to happen. That's just, yeah, not something that seems very realistic right now. Right now, it's more so able to help provide for and fund the hobby and kind of continue the channel. So that's kind of what it is right now, though if it grew a lot, I would consider it, I guess, but it would have to be pretty substantial. So I don't plan on that. That being said, though, I would like to upload more videos, and one of the big pain points is video editing. So if you happen to know any good editors, let me know in the comments. Video Vigilante asks, what Lord of the Rings characters that LEGO hasn't made yet would you like to see the most? That's a great question. Of course, them all. Like, I want to see the whole cast of characters in LEGO form. A few that I would think of would be the Witch King, which they already made this version right here from The Hobbit, but I'm talking more about the Lord of the Rings version, where he has his like crazy helmet when he fights Éowyn. And then Éowyn is another one. That's a big character. I'm kind of surprised they never made. I'm hoping sometime in the future we can get her, but we'll see. And then of course Faramir and Tom Bombadil would be a nice one. I don't think that's one they would ever do in a set, but I could see them doing, if they had the rights, Tom Bombadil in a gift with purchase. I feel like that would be a great character for a gift with purchase. It's very niche. People only really know about him who are fans of the book, but because he wasn't in the movies, right? So I just feel like that would be a really fun gift with purchase if they were able to do that. I would love to see a Tom Bombadil minifigure in LEGO. And then two other ones would be Isildur from the prologue scene when Sauron and him are fighting and he cuts off Sauron's ring, or the fingers off his ring. We got the Sauron from the prologue. Now I would like to get an Isildur. And then also, of course, we have to get some Gondor soldiers. We got Rohan soldiers. We did not get Gondor soldiers. So I think that's a bummer. I think we need to get those at some point. And who knows if we are able to get another Lord of the Rings set next year. Fingers crossed, maybe it's Minas Tirith, and we can get some of those Gondor soldiers and Gondor characters like Faramir that we never were able to get. UFO Bricks asks, I love the castle MOC you are working on. Are you going to do more non-IP MOCs in the future? So I probably will. I don't really have any plans for any specifically. For me, I just find it more interesting usually to do MOCs that are based off of IPs that I love, like Indiana Jones, Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power, that kind of stuff. It's kind of fun for me to just recreate scenes from those. So I'm sure I'm going to do more non-IP themes. Right now, I'm looking at getting back into some Lord of the Rings and maybe Indiana Jones ones, just because I'm just finishing that castle and I'm kind of ready to kind of pivot back to Lord of the Rings, at least for the next one. I actually have a few ideas. Maybe I won't share them all quite yet, but maybe we'll see. We'll see. I'm working on some things. Minifigs asks, what is your favorite Lord of the Rings or Hobbit minifigure? These are some of my favorite ones that I pulled out. So starting with Thranduil, this minifigure, I just love the hair crown mold. This is really cool, and I love that they did it in tan instead of the bright light yellow that Legolas had. I don't know, it just really has a whole different feel, and honestly it makes me really wonder what Legolas would have looked like if he had gotten the tan hair piece instead of the bright light yellow. I feel like that would have been pretty cool. I kind of wish we had got this old elven hair mold in the tan color. That would be really cool, I feel like. And the Witch King is a very nice minifigure. It just feels cool to get that character in a Lego form. And then Sauron, of course, it's just nice to get the big bad of the whole series from the prologue. I really like all the prologue scenes and the prologue characters, so I'm happy to have gotten that. But I think probably my favorite is the original Legolas, not the Dimensions version, not the Hobbit version, not the new version, but the original one, I think is the best version of Legolas. So, and Legolas is also my favorite character from Lord of the Rings, so I think that is my favorite minifigure from The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. Rick LOL asks, do you have plans for a big MOC like 4 or 6 base plates? I have thoughts about doing a MOC. I'm actually thinking about doing the Shire or Hobbiton, and what I would like to do is bag end with maybe a few more Hobbit holes and, you know, the little creek that runs through, the bridge, the big tree. Just a little bit more than like just bag end is what I'd like to do, and that would have to be pretty big. I haven't confirmed that I'm going to do that, but that is one of the ones I'm looking at doing. The other one that I've wanted to do for years is Meduseld, and if I do that, I would want to do it justice. I want to do it in a grand scale. So I don't know if I'm quite ready with that one yet. It would need a lot of brown and a lot of colors and pieces that I honestly just don't have enough of right now, I don't think. So I'll have to work up to that one, but that's one I would really, really like to do at some point in the future. So both of those would be a little bit more of a bigger scale, I think. Frasian Bricker asks, I love your content, keep up the great work. Big fan of Lord of the Rings and Hobbit YouTubers. My question is, are you going to collect all of the Lord of the Rings and Hobbit sets, but also all of the minifigures? That is a great question. I would love to, and that is a goal I have. I'm not actively working on it, but kind of in the back of my mind, and whenever I see a good deal for something, I'll get it. But I'm not actively like working on it, trying to pursue that quickly. But over time, I would like to have for sure all the minifigures and hopefully all of the sets. But some of them are getting pretty expensive on the aftermarket. Thankfully, I do have most of them from the 2012, 2013 themes. But it's getting a little bit more difficult to get some of the old ones that are just pretty expensive. Over time, I would love to. That is definitely a goal of mine, especially with the minifigures, to collect them all. It's also great for MOC building, because if I have all the minifigures, there's a lot more scenes that I can do with MOCs. Chris B asks, what franchise would you like to see get made into LEGO sets that hasn't yet? This may not be a surprise, and I don't even know if this is a good answer or if this counts, but I would like to see the Rings of Power. Of course, like, I love Lord of the Rings. They already made Hobbit sets. I would love to see a return to Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. But I want to see some Rings of Power, because I feel like we would get some great parts, some great scenes, some just great minifigures, and I just love Middle Earth, so that's kind of a boring thing, because I know like everything is Middle Earth with me. But that's probably the best answer I have right now. Honestly, my favorite IPs are, of course, Lord of the Rings, but then Pirates of the Caribbean, which they've already made, so I can't say that. Star Wars, of course, they make, so I don't really know what other IPs there are that I can think of right off the top of my head that they would do. So Rings of Power is my answer that I'm going with. That Lego Kid asks, what was the first big scale MOC you ever built? So it does depend on what you consider big scale, but when I was young, probably 10 years ago, there's old videos on this channel, and yeah, the quality is pretty much unwatchable. But I did make a large Rivendell. It was 12 base plates. 6 of the base plates were actually these like half base plate 16 wide ones, and the other 6 were the full like 32 wide ones. It was still pretty big. It took up the space of about like a big desk, and it was pretty tall and chunky. So that I would say was a big scale MOC. It was, I mean, it had to be torn apart into 2 giant sections just to transport. So that was the first like big scale, and maybe even the only big scale MOC that I've done. I've done MOCs that, you know, filled up an entire gray base plate and like 2 32 base plates, but that is definitely the biggest MOC I've ever done. Probably the only what would be considered big scale MOC that I've ever done. I would like to do some more. J Money asks, what is the most expensive minifigure you have? So I touched on this a little bit more in depth in the last video, which go ahead and watch if you haven't yet. I will quickly touch on a few of my top most expensive ones, and I don't know the order of these, and I don't even know if these are technically the most expensive that I have, but some of the most expensive ones that I have are the silver chrome stormtrooper, the polybag that came out in around 2009 or 10, I think. And then I also have the Davy Jones minifigure, which is definitely one of my favorite, more rare minifigures that I have. And then I also have the Captain Rex, the original Phase 2 one. Brick Country Crew asks, since the past 3 large Middle-earth sets have been based off of the Lord of the Rings films, do you think the next one could be based off of The Hobbit? And if it was, what would you want it to be? I personally would love to see an 18+ Erebor. Yeah, so Erebor would be really cool. And honestly, just any Return to Hobbit would be really cool too. My question with Erebor is, would they do Erebor before Smaug takes over or after? Like, it's all filled with gold, or not? It's all nice and pristine. I think I would probably prefer before Smaug takes over, just because then you can get the grandeur of it. They wouldn't do Bag End, since they just did that, and they're not gonna just do a return to that. But it would have to be a scene where they can have all 13 dwarves. So there's not many things that I feel like would do that. And of course they'd want it to be pretty iconic. So maybe the barrel escape or the goblin tunnels, maybe those would be some good options too. But I think Erebor is probably the best option that I would think. Now, I don't necessarily think it is very likely that we are going to see any Hobbit sets. If they're going to do one big one, I guess I should say, they would have to include all 13 dwarves. And I think they know that. And that means there would have to be probably 10 to 13 new molds, just because all of the dwarves are so unique and so intricate. They have their interesting beards and braids and whatever. They all had their own molds back in the day, but that was because they had a full theme for it. So a lot of these dwarves were in multiple sets. And so it made more sense to have these new molds for, you know, all these characters, because they're going to be coming in multiple sets. If they were just going to be released in this one single set, that just doesn't seem realistic, which is sad because I would love to see it, but it just doesn't seem realistic to me. Plus, The Hobbit is just not quite as popular of an IP as The Lord of the Rings. I know it's connected, but the films are not nearly as widely beloved or nostalgic as the Lord of the Rings movies are. So I think that's why they have been making Lord of the Rings sets, because there is a much bigger fondness from the widespread audience for the Lord of the Rings movies than there is for the Hobbit movies. But also, to play devil's advocate a little bit, they have been testing the waters with different IPs and one-off sets for the adults, just because they are really trying to push that and see what works. So maybe they would try a Hobbit set, but again, with all those new molds, I don't know that it's really likely. They would also have to get the rights for it because, again, as far as I know, kind of like what I talked about at the beginning of this video, I think they only have the rights for the Fellowship of the Ring, Two Towers, and Return of the King. I don't think they have the rights for the Hobbit movies. Of course, they could probably get them, but that would just be another hassle, I guess, that they would have to go through. So at this point, the best and most likely way that I could see them actually making some Hobbit sets is if 2 things happen. If they, 1, make a full theme of Lord of the Rings, and it does really well. Those two things. They gotta do a theme of Lord of the Rings, and it's gotta do so well that they're willing to kind of do offshoots of it. Then I think that's how we could probably start seeing some Hobbit sets. But even that seems so unlikely, which is so sad because I would love to see Hobbit sets. But man, it kind of feels like it's something that we may never see. But real quick, back to the whole speculation. If they were to make a Hobbit 18 plus set, I think Erebor would be the best decision and do it before Smaug takes over. And it would be really cool if we could get some pillars and some height to it. So there's like levels. I think that would be really cool and could really kind of help encapsulate the feeling of being in those like mines. I guess it's not mines technically, but like underground city. If we can have those giant grand pillars, you know, with some walkways above, some, you know, beautiful areas beneath, I think that could be really cool and even be a nice kind of framing for the whole piece. Just my thoughts. I think you're right though, that Erebor would be a good decision, probably the best decision. That's gonna do it for this video. Thank you for leaving all of these comments and questions. Don't forget to leave your comments in the comment section below for the next video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.